Iraq. So that was back in 2007. And also, majority of it is actually written after I deployed to Iraq. And it's me coming back and experiencing war firsthand. And experiencing this was very, very hard. And so, dealing with all the repercussions of war, especially firsthand, there was a lot of emotions and a lot of, a lot of things is going on with my head. And so the only way to really get these comfortable, get comfortable is basically a lot of help from my wife and also writing too. So in this presentation, I'll be separating poems and my visual work. And so I'm going to introduce my poems first, which is a direct correlation to my visual work. So I'm actually working on a small manuscript that's been developing for several years now. And so the poem is actually called, it's a book-length poem called The Overhang of Cumulus. And so this first part is actually, it's the basis of all my work that I'm doing so far. And as once I'm done reading this, then I'll go ahead and introduce the next, the first series of paintings that I've done. So, excerpt from The Overhang of Cumulus. Outside is a season of absence. It's unquestionable. The city's warm breath, heat that whistles the tea kettle's trajectory of motor fire on grandma's stove. While oiled hair nestles in a cylindrical throat of a rifle and singes to whispers in a darkened tree line. A clock's muted ticking is the length of a prayer, adjacent to the argument of gunfire in a person's peripheral. One would have to tell what happens of immediate morning, the vibrating floor, dust building and escaping while the neighbor's house crumbles towards my feet. A whole city glistening of brass, war infertile of winters. So this first series is called Precursor. I was actually part of the Tulsa Artist Fellowship starting from 2016, and it ended in 2018. And so I was invited to do a show. It was actually my first exhibition that I'd done in 2018, and well, actually 2017. I'm sorry. And so this is the series that I developed. It took a whole year to develop, and so it's mixed media, so it includes aerosol, joint, compound, acrylic, oil paint, and oil sticks. And they're all made on canvas. It's running over plateaus in the distance. I would want to talk of recognizable images before sunset. Motherwell's stark black and white paintings, or seemingly dreaming into sentences left unsaid. Please excuse me, I have mistaken everything surrounding, well, in REM sleep, the history of anything else is codicil in vertebrae. So these are actually two separate paintings. And yeah, so it's just basically a mixture of oil, joint compound. And so when I first started this series, if you could notice some of the scraping here and inside the images, I would say like the neck area where the jawline is too, and bits of the hair. So I started off with that first, and that's just basically a very physical act of scraping joint compound and building those layers up. And I'm guessing there's about 10 10 to 12 layers of joint compound where I'm utilizing this material, this non-traditional material for painting. And once I've scraped one layer of joint compound, I'll go ahead and use some acrylic paint, light washes of that. And then once that dries, then I go ahead and scrape with sandpaper, and I'll reveal some of the pieces that are in the first couple of scrapes. So there's a history behind all of this, and some of them are translucent and some of them are very opaque. Here's the two other pieces that I've done. They were basically, I think when I first started doing this, I was thinking about identity, and I was thinking about diaspora, the term diaspora, which is, basically I was, in my own sense, I was, it was my choice to go to Iraq, but I just felt this really weird sense of like, looking back and feeling this really crazy idea of like, why am I even doing this? Why am I even in Iraq? And so there was this complete guilt of like being and serving in the military, and just recognizing the fact that, my ancestors have been, facing this and looking into Iraqis' eyes and being able to just kind of understand the struggle and just be really empathetic with them. And so, after my 4 years were done, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so when I got out of the Marine Corps, just that reflection has really stuck with me, and I kept thinking about that direct day and that direct sense of like, okay, I know what I want to do from now on. And so a lot of this was very it was a lot of physical acts of scraping and sitting there and looking at these paintings. And I was actually having like these really unique conversations with them, and I was like, basically seeing this canvas build itself, and it was just kind of like this reflection of myself. And so these were like I was having direct conversation, with the canvas, and see myself in that sense. I was like basically talking to myself. So almost like these were like these direct correlations of everything that I was feeling at that time, everything that was kind of built up between being in Iraq to the Tulsa Artist Fellowship. And a lot of time has passed, and it was just time. It was just that cushion led me. There was a lot of built up aggression, a lot of built up emotions and whatnot. So I just felt like it was a time to release all of this. And so that's why I titled them Precursor series. It was just kind of like my introduction to becoming a visual artist, and telling everyone that I'm ready to start making some serious work. And so now we'll go on to Gunfire Muted Light, which they were all created in 2017. It started in 2015 and they got done in 2017. I was invited to do the show in California alongside some amazing visual artists, native, indigenous visual artists. And once I was invited, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And so I immediately sketched them out, and I was flipping through my manuscript, and so I found this one here, and I thought it fit really well. Figures disfigure a calm memory, and instead leaves you twined to the foliage of gunfire. Someone rearranges a minute to sound like an hour. The exploration of silence is in a dog's growl over a child ashed in memories or in nightmares. Lightning ticks the beveled limestone. Gunfire skies the muted light. Knowing this, I grasp the color of your hands, measure a prayer to sniper fire, return the blackened pine to forgotten sketches of you. Okay, so these are all oil paintings, strictly oil. And so you see a lot of the geometric lines here. And so I was really thinking about language. I was thinking about I was thinking about Dinepazad and how like complex it is, and how It's, I'm not a fluent speaker, and so just that idea of talking to elders and being able to have that conversation, there was that language barrier there. And so I just thought of like some of the things that I was like, in the past, like being in grad school or grade school, I was like having a lot of problems with math too. And I kind of thought like language, especially the internet was like just as frustrating and just as complicated as geometry for me. And so I took that and I was like, okay, well, let's kind of build on that. Let's think about that. And so I started to um, plan out all of these portraits. And so I wanted to really look back at Edward Curtis photographs and just how much identity is missing inside those photographs. Just kind of like these misrepresentations of indigenous culture, indigenous identity also too. And so I wanted to go ahead and reconceptualize them and become, just basically mess with the whole idea of, deconstructing their identity, deconstructing who they are, and, formulating something else into making it look more contemporary. And just the confusion of it is just, understanding, that it's basically my idea of like me speaking to these people and, having that language barrier of like, what are the, what's been said and whatnot. But also too, it was like me thinking about like being in Iraq. There's like some points where, there's gunfire shooting at night time. And, when gunfire is shooting at night and it's completely dark, usually if you look at somebody and the muzzle flashes are going, you only see glimpses of their face every now and then. And then when they move around, you'll catch an eye here, you'll catch like, part of their hand or maybe like part of their nose every now and then. And so that's very like disorienting. And so I had that same mentality. I was like, okay, well, so let's apply that to these paintings that I'm doing. Let's go ahead and, since I was the aggressor back in Iraq, maybe I'm looking, since I'm kind of taking that concept of like the colonizer and being like, okay, what did they see? And so they're very like, like very haunting pieces too. But over time, I felt like I was becoming more and more, it was more about like also exploring my craft, exploring my technique, and being able to really hone in the skills of being a person that works with oil painting. So, and these are large scale. They're about 60 by 60 inches, which is about 5 feet by 5 feet. And I stretched everything. I stretched the canvas, made the frames and everything. So, and this next series is called Contingency Memories. And so the materials are also oil paint on canvas, and they're roughly about 24 by 24 inches. So I was making a lot of work back in 2017. I had the space. I had, it was a 24-hour studio space. And so, again, I was looking at my manuscript and I was reflecting on this. The sound of a river silking his singed hair, laminating the darkened landscape. The radiance of morning light is penetrating skin as frozen ground submerges a newborn's laughter. Is the shadow of you sleeping on floors? Contingency comes memory. Take my hand. Locate you. Again, so I'm taking a lot of Edward Curtis photographs and deconstructing them, and I basically wanted to put a filter on there. If you go to Photoshop, they have all these like preset filters where you could mess with. You could pixelate the face, so on and so forth. And so I was just really thinking about identity again, and I was thinking about like prescribed identity too, and just this whole idea of like, romanticism, this whole ideology of like, we're stuck in this kind of like this nostalgia of like Western perspectives about how, who we are. And so I wanted to really disrupt that lens, and I wanted to give this new outlook and, take the stance and say, like um, you know, modernity has always been this part of our lifestyle. We've always adapted. You know, and so we're taking these steps to, be more contemporary now. And so these are some of the paintings that I've done um, on that topic. I was criticized for um, painting them almost photorealistically, and so a lot of people thought I was just messing with the photograph and then just pasting it directly on canvas, but that wasn't the deal. So I intentionally painted some of the parts unfinished, like for instance, like her sleeve here, and there's part of these areas here where I didn't paint. I left intentionally just because I wanted to show that there was my hand in this technique. There was my hand in this craft. And this is the last series that I've done so far. And I've made this while I was attending the Vermont Studio Center in Johnson, Vermont. And this is called Flora, the Flora series. And they're made up of aerosol, acrylic, graphite, and oil paint on paper. And then after it's completely dry, I'll mount them on canvas. And the size varied. They were from like anything from like 18 by 18 all the way up to 60 by 8 feet. And so this is the poem that attaches alongside it. I remember watching you scratch frosted windows with your thumbnail, and you let the frost beneath your nail melt and flood the space. At hand, furls of dampened mud mend, while the stare of a doorway muffles water tapping on porcelain. Something nearing in the distant frightens the boy as it disguises his dreams with moth chitin during an eclipse. He lays in a caesura of arthritic buildings near the hairline fracture, where the concrete is frostbitten. So I just wanted to show you guys, kind of like a step-by-step, like a little process that where I started. So these were actually the first 4 paintings that I did in this series. And so basically I pinned them against the wall and I taped them. And so these are really, really super light washes. Then I go ahead and start off with the first layer. This is probably like 2 or 3 layers. And then this is on the far right. This is where I'm letting that breathe a little bit. So I'm kind of like, once I've done, gotten so far where this is all the paint is already wet. I can't do any more with this anymore. So I go ahead and work on the next 3 series or 3 paintings. And so it takes a lot of time just taping off a lot of things. So once I go ahead and tape these forms out, I'll go ahead and lightly cut out some of the drawn aspects of it. So I'll draw on top of the masking tape, and I'll lightly cut it with a razor blade. And then so this is how it came out on the left side. This is like a 60 by 44 inch painting here, and then on the right side is another 60 by I think like 28 inches or something like that. Yeah, and so I was just really the topic of Gunfire Muted Light and also Contingency Memory. They're really heavy topics, and it was just a lot of hard, kind of a hard topic to really carry around a lot, and completely take time to really develop those paintings again over and over, and also just explaining it over and over again. So when I went to Vermont, I really wanted to start fresh and start I kind of miss like the idea of like being more intuitive with my paintings and being more painterly by making these rational and irrational decisions of painting. Um, and if there was a mistake there, I had to really tell myself, it's only paint. I could paint over it. And so I really wanted to, step up at in Vermont and just become more and more painterly with my work. And so you see over time they started to become more and more tighter here. I started to work on more of the shading um, in certain areas here. So a lot of these forms are very, I call them artificial forms. They talk about the whole premises of these paintings, even though they're called Flora. It was basically about invasive species, invasive plants, and I was really fond of salt cedar, where they embed salt deposits into the land, and they kill off indigenous plants um, located around each plant base. So I was taken, back by that. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And so that premise is just basically a metaphor for, colonialism and assimilation too. So a lot of these they're based off of that. And you see a lot of the colors are becoming more and more vibrant here. You see the spray paint in the back instead of a lot of the drips and a lot of the brushstrokes from previous paintings. And so as I'm becoming more and more colorful, there's a lot more forms that are becoming more and more unique and weirder. And so another thing too, that as I'm like building these new paintings, my daughter was born too, she was born in 2017. And so this was back in 2019 when I started making them. Um, we were buying like abundance of toys, whatnot, and so she was, working with like these Legos and just like newborn infant toys, where a lot of it's made out of plastic and they have these really bright forms and whatnot. And so I was studying that and I was like, man, these were right when we're born, we're actually like comfortable with this idea of like, plastic is fine. That's like, I don't understand why we're so comfortable with the idea of plastic being around us, from growing up all the way up until, we pass. And so, that later on that became, I think that right now is an invasive species too. So, so yeah, that is the end of my show.